The Mission, Chapter 5. And so, thanks to Adeline, Nathan's mission begins again. The first thing that Nathan learns is that Chauncey Jerome is not an easy man to find. After being evicted from New Haven, poor and penniless, Jerome was forced to once again wear the apron of an apprentice and be a simple clockmaker for a series of different workshops, moving from town to town and serving under factory bosses that were once his employees. And now, on a freezing cold January day, Nathan reaches the final forwarding address for the great Chauncey Jerome. It's a 3-story townhouse in the center of Waterbury, Connecticut. But at this moment, it's not a house, but the rubble and wreckage of a house. It just so happens that in the middle of the night, a tremendous snowstorm with hurricane winds knocked the massive steeple tower from atop of an adjacent church, and the broken steeple speared Jerome's house like a harpoon through a whale. First, it broke through the roof and smashed in all the upper tier of the rooms, with bricks and mortar falling like cannonballs through the lower floors. Next, it crashed down to the second story, where Jerome kept his bedroom, breaking glass and furniture with ferocious sounds. And then, quite dramatically, the heaviest timbers of the steeple plummeted directly towards the sleeping Chauncey Jerome, who woke wide awake just in time to witness 2 timbers, 10 inches thick, break right in 2 over his bed and slam to the floor, leaving Jerome shaken but untouched. It was the opinion of all who saw the ruins that Jerome did not stand 1 chance in 10,000 of not being killed in that moment. But let's not forget, the name Chauncey, of Norman origin, is a name that means lucky. And so here, amidst the rubble, is where Nathan finds Lucky Jerome, removing a few personal items from the fragments of his former home. "Mr. Jerome, you may not remember me, but you know my father. I'm Nathan Burge, son of John Burge." "Hello, son. It's good to hear a familiar name. You know, your father and I worked side by side in many endeavors in the early days of clock fever. I'm afraid those days are over. What brings you to Waterbury?" "You, sir. I've come to take your advice on a certain matter." "That's very kind, but I'm not sure I have any advice left to give. But I can give you something which I used to put a very high price tag, but now it seems I can only give away for free. My time. So please, step inside the parlor, the only room left intact here, and we can warm ourselves a bit and have a proper chat. It's quite rare to see a friendly face these days." And here, inside the only standing room of a wrecked house with a church steeple lanced through its roof, Jerome relishes the chance to tell Nathan a story. Not a story of secrets, but the story of Jerome's life, of his destiny, of how he rose from poverty to be the king of clockmaking. And there, tucked inside a small, unassuming corner of Jerome's life story, is where Nathan finds an unexpected clue. Like all autobiographies, Jerome starts the tale of his life at the beginning. "I was born poor, but taught the values of hard work. My father, respectable and industrious, he made wrought iron nails as a blacksmith to be the breadwinner for our family. I was one of 6 children. Our advantages for education were very poor, so when I was about 9 years old, my father took me in to his shop to be his apprentice. But it was not for long. As soon as I started, my father died of the black colic. He suffered for 3 days of the most excruciating pains from the disease. And the day of his death was a sad one for me, for I knew that I should lose my happy home and be forced to seek employment on a stranger's farm. Never shall I forget the Monday morning that I took my little bundle of clothes and with a bursting heart bid my poor mother goodbye. I knew the rest of my family would soon leave their separate ways in order to support themselves under new guardians. There wasn't any manufacturing of any account in the country, so poor boys like me were obliged to let themselves to farmers, and it was extremely difficult to find a place to live where they would treat a poor boy like a human being. Almost every day when I was alone in the fields, I would burst into tears, not because I had to work, but because my father was dead, whom I loved, and our happy family separated and broken up, never to live together again. But I worked very hard. At the age of 14, did almost the work of a man, in all kinds of weather, of which I never complained. At 17, it was an ordinary task for me to march 30 miles on a hot summer's day with a heavy load of joiner's tools on my back. In the winter, I'd spend all day chopping down trees with my shoes filled with snow. Never had a pair of boots till I was more than 20 years old. And I never forgot the feeling of being in those fields all alone. These are memories etched in me. I feel the same power of that sadness every time I remember. The world was scarier back then, not just because I was a young boy. There were lots of things happening that even the priests and the professors didn't understand. Things that rightly scared everyone. Superstitious things. Like one day, an eclipse took place, which so terrified the good people in every part of the land. They were ignorant about the operations of the sun that long ago, not like the present time. And I heard something about eclipses, but had not the faintest idea what they could be. I was hoeing corn that day in the field, and suddenly the great light of the sun was snuffed out by this big shadow, and everything around me started to fade to dark. I thought it was the day of judgment, as I watched the sun steadily disappearing with a trembling heart. And not again did that sun appear, bright and shining as before, did I then regain my breath. Back then, you see, it was a world we just did not understand. A world of magic powers, of witchcraft, of fear. That's the world where our clock fever first took hold. I remember the first time I ever saw a clock. When I was a young boy, Gideon Roberts, the first clockmaker in Bristol, passed by my father's house on horseback. He had 2 clocks peeking out on each side of his saddlebags, and a third lashed on behind the saddle with the dials painted in plain sight as a kind of horseback marketing. After seeing Gideon, clocks became this great curiosity to me. Here was this farmer who learned how to make a clock, and it liberated him. It gave him the opportunity to build something of value and to travel to new places where there was a great demand for clocks and sell them for a good price and make a proper living. So later on, in my great moment of sadness when I was toiling away all alone in that farmer's field, this memory of Gideon thrust itself again into my consciousness, like a ghost or some kind of spiritual vision. I saw him right there in front of me on his horse, with his clocks tucked in his saddlebags, riding slowly across the field and disappearing into the forest. I felt his presence so real, like he was inviting me to follow him. In this daydream of mine, Gideon and his clocks represented my greatest desire, an escape from the hardships of the field work, from poverty, from my sadness. And so I promised myself, right then and there, in that field, that I'd do whatever I could to find a clockmaker like Gideon who would take me as an apprentice. I kept this dream in a secret part of myself for many years. Then, one year, there came upon us a winter which none of the old people will ever forget, and which many of the young have heard a great deal about. There was ice and snow in every month of the year. There was even frost on the 4th of July. Everything in life seemed to grow harder and harder. No work could be had. I was in debt for my little house in Plymouth, which I had bought only a short time before, and had a payment to make on it the next spring. So I made preparations to leave my young family and go south to the city of Baltimore to go look for some work, a prospect which I could not help feeling very sad. But right before I departed, I accidentally heard that Mr. Eli Terry was about to fit up his factory for making his new patent shelf clock. Terry was the most famous and successful clockmaker in the whole region at that time, a man who could make 500 clocks at the same time using special machinery in his shop. I thought perhaps I could get a job with him since he was expanding his operations. So on my way to Baltimore, I took a small detour to call upon Mr. Terry, and to my good fortune, closed a bargain with him that day. I shall never forget the good feeling that this bargain gave me. It was my ticket to the world of clockmaking, And more important, it meant that I could stay close to my family. Imagine my wife and children, tears still in their eyes after saying goodbye to me, going away for a long time. And then here's a knock on the door. And here I am back at home, not more than a few hours after leaving for Baltimore, hugging them, all in my arms, sharing the good news of a job offer, right here in Plymouth, from the famous Eli Terry. But I would never have imagined how far I would go in life myself, becoming the most successful clockmaker in all the country, and for the thousands of clocks that I've produced in my factories, more than Eli Terry ever made. How far my clocks have traveled too. One time, I remember giving a dozen brass clocks to a missionary at Jerusalem. They were shipped from London to Alexandria in Egypt, and from there to the Holy Land, and hence on the backs of camels to Jerusalem, where they arrived safe into the great joy of the missionary, and attracted a great deal of attention and admiration. My clocks sold in Europe, in Africa, even in China. But alas, what has become of me now? When my company went bankrupt, through no fault of my own, every dollar that I'd saved out of a long life of toil and labor was not enough to support my family even for 1 year. It was hard indeed for a man 63 years old. My heart sickened at the prospects ahead. Imagine the feelings of my family and my friends to see creditors coming to our house every day with their pockets full of debts to collect, piles of papers on the table every night. How would you feel if you had to shutter all your splendid factories and tell hundreds of your employees that their jobs, their livelihoods, are gone? And then you yourself are evicted from your own home. I had this beautiful mansion at the head of New Haven Bay, which I almost worshipped. And now, Jerome falls silent for a long moment. He is overtaken by the power of these difficult memories. Well, Mr. Jerome, you built an honorable legacy and created good for your fellow townspeople. To this we all can attest. And if you'll allow, I came to find you for a reason, and I have something that may offer you some solace. You see, as a part of my business affairs in Bristol, I came upon a new conclusion as to how your factories there caught fire and who is responsible for it. Oh, Mr. Burge, thank you for your consideration, but I already know who destroyed my factories. You already know? Oh yes, I know. The hand that lit the flame that consumed my life's work in Bristol is the same hand that corrupted my enterprises in New Haven. It's the hand that knocked over this church steeple and launched it like an arrow through my house. Not to kill me, it seems. I was not to die that way, but to humble me. It is the hand of God, the Almighty. I already know that it was the good Lord who destroyed my businesses, and for what reasons I did not understand for a long time. I was mayor of New Haven, owner of an empire of clock factories. I was too prideful. So the Lord struck down my vanity, cast me out of my ivory towers, sent me back poor and broken down in spirit and health. 40 pounds of flesh now I've lost. But he, the good Lord, ensured that my ambition was never extinguished. I was never designed by Providence to eat the bread of dependence, for just like poison, it will surely kill me in a short time. Yet I live, and I yet work. But now, thanks to God, I do so with humility. He finally taught me to claim no title nobler than the title God has ordained for me. My destiny, a humble mechanic, not a king, but a clockmaker. Nathan is taken aback by Jerome's response. He was ready to make the great reveal, to expose Welsh to Jerome as the instigator of Jerome's troubles. But it doesn't much matter now, does it? Jerome is in a higher place, and the villains of his past no longer hold any power over him, nor does vengeance. Nathan listens to the whisper inside of him, "Let it be." So Nathan says his goodbye and mounts his carriage to return to Bristol. And just as he does, Jerome jumps after him. "Mr. Burge, there's one more thing you must know. Very important." It's very common to hear a clock make a creaking noise, and this leads inexperienced persons to think it has become dry inside. This is not so. You will always find it to be caused by the loop of the crutch wire where it touches the rod. Apply a little oil and we'll cure it. Only watch oil. A few pennies worth of oil will last many years. Oh, right, Mr. Jerome. Thanks for the tip, and best wishes to you. The ticking of a clock is music to me, Mr. Burge. It's music, if you know how to hear it. Not everyone can, but you, son of John Burge, a clockmaker of Bristol, someone like you just might be able to hear that sweet song. On his journey back to Bristol from Waterbury, Nathan should be feeling disappointed. Another dead end, right? Another failure to find any evidence to bring against Welsh. But instead, he feels as if mysterious things are happening again. Consequential, connected things. Things that will revive his mission. He also senses that there is something important buried there in Jerome's story, a clue. Nathan can't put his finger on it, not yet, but it's there, and it will reveal itself in time. And Nathan will not have long to wait for more mysterious things to happen in Bristol. It's a few months after his trip to Waterbury. Nathan is riding home in his carriage on the main road when suddenly a distressed woman runs into the street and blocks his way. It's Mary, the associate of Thomas. "Mr. Burge, please, we need your help. There's trouble at the mine. Miners are trapped underwater and there's nothing being done to help them. Thomas is organizing a rescue, but the copper mine owners won't allow it. It's getting out of control. Please, is there anything you can do?" "Climb up, Mary, into my carriage. Let's go now and see what we can do." It is a scene of chaos at the Bristol copper mine. The mine manager, Mr. Wheatley, is shouting at a group of rioting miners. Nathan spots Thomas among them. "Thomas, what's going on?" "Mr. Burge, we need help. The mine's flooded and there's miners stuck underground. The manager's not letting anyone back because he's afraid to lose more men. But something's got to be done." "Right, Thomas, let me talk to him." "Mr. Wheatley, son, are you in charge here? I'm Nathan Burge and I have a request." "Yes, sir, Mr. Burge, I know who you are." "How long has it been since the floodwaters came into the entrance of the mine?" Only about an hour, sir, maybe less." "And how deep is that mine?" "Maybe 500 feet with diversions on the sides halfway." "So there's time, Wheatley. There's no way the water could have filled a mine that deep after only an hour, but we need to get in there before it does." Wheatley is young and inexperienced. Nathan senses that he has no plan whatsoever to help those miners. But Nathan has a plan. "Mr. Wheatley, listen to me. I have experience on what to do here from my days in the California gold mines. I can get those miners out for you, but I need manpower. Thomas here is going to pick 10 men to help me. I'll also need a long, sturdy rope and a handbell." "Mr. Burge, I can't allow you to go down there, sir." "Well, I don't work for you, Mr. Wheatley, and I'm going down there on my own right, so the least you can do is give me some helping hands." So Nathan organizes his rescue team. He has Thomas at the head of a line of men with their hands on a long rope, the end of which is looped in a knot and attached to Nathan's waist. "Here's the plan, boys. I'm going to swim through the water at the mine's entrance. And when I come up on the other side of the water inside the mine shaft, I'll use this handbell to ring out anyone stuck down there and direct them to come to me and follow the rope back to you. Right now, those trapped miners are seeing just a wall of water in front of them. They don't know they can swim through it. But I'll go in there and show them the way out. And after the last one comes, I'll start tugging real hard on this rope. And that'll be your signal to pull me out too, fast as you can, tug-of-war style." The men nod in their understanding of Nathan's plan, and Nathan starts his perilous walk forward, wading into the tempest pool of rushing waters at the entryway of the mine. In his mind, Nathan's fired up with adrenaline, ablaze with those old survival skills and instincts that were infused in him from his past adventures out in the Wild West. His head is nearly submerged in the chilly waters, and now he takes one last big breath. Under the water we go, swimming forward fast, using hands to touch and feel the submerged ceiling of the mine shaft. 10 seconds underwater. Now 20. Lungs burning, but finally dry rock on the ceiling and feet touching the muddy floor. And now, at last, breaking the surface, leaving the water for the liberation of air and space. Nathan rises from the waters into the total darkness of the mine shaft. He walks forward, out of the pool, and the water follows him, slowly rising behind him in a constant swirling mass. Nathan rings the handbell loudly. "Hello, is anyone there? If you can hear me, follow the sound. I'm here to take you out." Then, like a miracle, a constellation of lights appears in the darkness ahead. It's the lanterns on the helmets of the miners. Dozens of them approach, very much alive and very much relieved. "Quick, gentlemen, we have no time. The waters are rising and we need to get out now. This rope runs through the water and out of the mine shaft. Grab the line and follow it, hand over hand, like this. Down into the water and straight through. Pull yourself forward as fast as you can. Do not let go of the rope. If you go now, you won't have to hold your breath more than half a minute." And so the miners line up and enter the rushing waters, one by one, as they follow the rope line to safety. But it's slow going, and each minute that passes means there's more water accumulating in the mine shaft. For every man that passes down the rope line, the rest of the group needs to take 10 steps back deeper into the mine to accommodate the advancing waters. Now, the last of the miners disappears under the dark waters, and Nathan is suddenly alone. And there, alone, in near total darkness, lit only by the wayward light of a helmet lantern, Nathan is struck off balance by a menacing rumble and a terrible sound. Like the moaning of a dying animal, or the splintering of a mast of a tall sailing ship right before it snaps. And suddenly, one half of the mine wall collapses right in front of him. A mass of red sandstone shears right off and crumbles into a pile at his feet, revealing a denser layer of schist rock behind it, like the raising of a curtain at a theater. And there, etched in the layer of schist, is something quite horrifying. There, right in front of Nathan, is a massive imprint in the stone, like a fossilized tapestry of a giant skull. Fearsome like a bear, but 10 times larger than a bear. The skull of a monster, with jagged teeth as big as knives and wide open jaws, like it's about to swallow him up, like the face of the devil himself. In a panic, Nathan yanks forcefully on the rope, sending the signal to Thomas and his rope team to pull, and pull hard. And in the next second, Nathan feels the whiplash of the tugging of a dozen men. He is propelled straight through the floodwaters, like a cork popping out of a champagne bottle, and right out of the mouth of the mine shaft, sliding across the mud, scared, soaked, but safe. After the collapse of the mine, the miners refused to go back to work. Rumors and conspiracies began to take root, stories about dragons and demons, sinister and superstitious beliefs that the mine was cursed. Nathan wasn't the only one who witnessed something mysterious down in the mine shaft. Other miners had uncovered giant fossils of footprints of some kind of giant reptilian creature, pieces of bone shards that were neither human nor animal. And then there were the ominous sounds, scary vibrations of something else down there, moving, still alive. But whenever the mine managers were confronted with all of this, they always ensured that any hard evidence of these things were pulverized along with the copper ore, and issued strict orders to get back to work. But now the miners claim that the place is cursed, and only God himself can command them back down into the depths. So Wheatley and the mine managers do the only thing that they can. They arrange for the good Lord to come down and give the command. They arrange for a Roman Catholic priest from New Britain, Father Luke Daly, to come bless the mine and return every Sunday to say Mass and confer the Lord's divine protection over the miners. And in this way, the Irish miners returned to their work, and the excavation of copper ore from the bedrock of Bristol continued. But for Nathan, he can't shake the experience of what he saw in his final moments inside the mine shaft. And like any true investigator, his inquiries continue to occupy him, invading his peace of mind at every opportunity, like the torturous muses of a master poet. So he decides to seek the counsel of a friend, someone whose opinion he trusts on mysterious matters, such as giant underground monster skulls. As Nathan continues his quest, there is another consequential happening that is unfolding beyond the rolling hills of Bristol. It is a bloody and ruthless conflict, infecting every homestead across the United States of America, a country which is not so united at this moment in time, in what became known as the Great Rebellion, the Civil War, a fratricide of Union against Confederate, brother against brother. And with the shadow of war swirling in the background, Nathan decides to make a special trip up to Massachusetts to seek the counsel of an old friend. Here, at Amherst College, Nathan finds his way to a quirky teacher's office that is decorated uniquely different from all the other offices. Its shelves and walls are adorned with a treasure trove of geological specimens. There are craggy rocks, gleaming gemstones, multicolored minerals, and precious crystals scattered all over the office. Then, none other than Newton Manross arrives, looking like the professor that he is now, arms full of notebooks and students' papers. "Nathan Burge, in the flesh and in my office. By gosh, what a pleasure. Are you here to enroll in my chemistry class? I surely will accept you as a student, but the provost may disagree based on your history of absenteeism at Yale." "Well, Newt, I heard all your lectures are too long and too boring anyway, Professor Manross, so that's just fine by me." "Aha, so then you must be here to enlist in my company, no? Did you hear that they made me captain in the Union Army? I'm commander of Company K of the 16th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry. The people of Bristol even gave me a sword, like I'm a knight of the realm. Come with me, Nathan. We can fight side by side against the rebel Confederates. Save the Union." "If only it were that easy, Newt. What did your wife Charlotte say when you broke the news that you're off to war?" "She protested, as one might expect, but I told her the truth of the matter, that she can better afford to have a country without a husband than a husband without a country." "That sounds like poetry, Newt." "It's patriotism, Nathan. My grandfather fought in the Old French War. My father was a drummer boy in the Revolution and beat back the British again in 1812. Now it's my duty to enlist, to uphold the honor of the Manross name." "Don't be a fool, Newt. There's no special protection in a name. I saw men on the frontier charge into a shootout thinking they were invincible because honor was on their side. Most of them never came back alive. Just dead bodies piled up in a wagon the next day. I respect your courage, Newt, but be careful." "Surely. And if we're lucky, it'll all be finished by Christmas, my friend. Haven't you heard the news from Shiloh? We got them on the run. Union forces under General Grant and his Army of the Tennessee routed them rebels, pushed them right back. We got the upper hand here, Nathan, and I'll be headed to the front to keep up the pressure. But you didn't come all this way just to give me a stern warning, did you?" "No, Newt. In fact, I came to ask you about something. There are some mysterious happenings around the Bristol copper mine that are spooking the miners. A lot of them just went on strike. It was nearly a riot. And we had to call a priest to come settle everyone down again. I know you're a man of expertise in mineralogy. I was hoping you could educate me. How do you explain the strange noises that they're hearing down there in the shaft, and the imprints of giant animals that they're finding down there? I saw it myself, Newt. This fossil, big jaws like a wolf, but on a head bigger than a horse. Dragon teeth. Now the miners are calling the mine cursed, and are rightly scared to dig any deeper, in the fear of finding the beast they belong to." "Nonsense, Nathan. Of course, nonsense. There are bones buried at that mine, but not dragon bones. You know, once upon a time when I was young, I was fishing in the brook up west of Zack's Mountain next to the copper mine. And a rainstorm arrived and forced me to take shelter under a big boulder. As the downpour of water washed away some of the soil under my feet, I noticed a white stone in the mud. Except it wasn't a stone, but a skull. Imagine my surprise, gosh almighty. The next day I came back with the authorities and a shovel, and together we unearthed the entire skeleton of a full-sized man. A hunter, by the looks of his habit and the items buried next to him. But not a Yankee hunter, no. Most likely a native tribesman of the area who died a very long time ago. My theory matched with what we know about that area. Old stories that say Zack's Mountain was a landmark trail used by the Tungus natives who passed through, and that this place where the copper mine now operates used to be a burial ground for their tribe. So it's very possible, Nathan, that you might encounter some bones while digging at that copper mine. But scary sounds and sharp teeth of a dragon like out of a storybook? I've heard about such things in my studies. Excavations that dug up giant skeletons of creatures big as elephants, but they weren't elephants. We don't rightly know what they are, except that they're dead, not to be found roaming around Bristol anymore, that's for sure. As for the noises, those must be the slippage amongst the heavy layers of rocks and soil near the mine shaft. Little earthquakes, like those mysterious rumbling noises heard by the locals around that town called Moodus across the river. All mine shafts are prone to collapses and tremors, especially if there's the presence of water. In fact, you may not be able to see it, but rocks themselves can absorb and retain water. And if the digging of a mine shaft alters the temperature or moisture or stability of a subterranean environment, even just a little, rocks themselves can start gushing water and release quite a deluge. Flood the whole place. Especially some of the rock types that I inspected there, such as a rock called serpentinite, which has a very high bound water content, like a sponge. And although it's a very rare ultramorphic rock variety, I did investigate the presence of it at the Bristol Copper Mine as a special request one time. Newt, what did you say the name of that rock was? Serpentinite, named as such because its surface texture is scaly, with green striations, like the skin of a snake. Is that right, Newt? Exactly, Nathan. Serpentinite, like a snake. Here, Nathan realizes, in one sharp instant, the deep sting of betrayal. Newton Manross was the unknown suspect that Nathan's Irish associate Mary had witnessed at the mine, looking for a rock like a serpent. And so it was Newton's coat that contained the letter with the secret and ominous threat against Nathan's factory. Betrayal burns hot now inside Nathan, and an urgency to expose Newton for what he really is, an agent for Welsh. And, Newt, just for my curiosity, who was it that tasked you to investigate the rocks down there at the mine? It was Elijah Welsh, wasn't it? Welsh, Nathan? No. It was your father, of course. John Burge. My father? Yes. As part of a mission he gave me, Nathan. What mission, Newt? The mission. Good gracious, Nathan. I thought you would have known. Didn't your father tell you? No, but please explain it to me, Newt. I need to understand what's going on here. Many years ago, your father, representing a group of clockmakers who I assumed to be his partners, approached me with a special task. A business affair that they insisted remained secret, never to talk to anyone else about. He wouldn't even share the names of the other clockmakers that he was representing. Their insistence on non-disclosure, you had to understand, it was routine practice among clockmakers. So I assumed all the secrecy was because of Bristol's industrial competition and legal infringements. You know, your father, he was involved in a number of lawsuits at the time, just like everybody else in the clock business. But in any case, they asked me to do something particular for them and recruited me for my expertise on the matter. What expertise is that, Newt? You see, Nathan, they knew that I had begun to experiment the use of special geological specimens in the clock designs at our family's Manross clock shop. For example, at the pivot points and pinions of a clock movement, we installed small jewels like rubies and sapphires, jewels of a particular hardness and with the elemental qualities that reduce friction within the clock movement and delivered a better timekeeping function. But your father and his group wasn't interested in my jeweled movement designs. They wanted me to find a different kind of specimen, a very particular kind of rock that they believe existed in Bristol and could be discovered again somewhere in Bristol's hilly terrain. I sensed it was very important to them. The clockmakers that your father represented were quite invested in the matter. They funded my studies in Europe, as well as travel down to South and Central America, so I could investigate all these excavations in exotic places like Trinidad, Panama, and Mexico. I could study different techniques and new technologies for digging deeper. Innovative practices, just like my jeweled clock movements, that I could bring back to Bristol and put in place at the excavation site where your father and his group believed that their specimen could be found. The Bristol Copper Mine, right, Newt? Yes, Nathan, the Copper Mine. And that was my mission, to execute a secret excavation at the Bristol Copper Mine in order to find this special specimen. But alas, we've dug there for years and have yet to strike gold. But it's not gold they're looking for, Newt. What is it? What is this special specimen? I can't tell you because it doesn't have a name. But your father showed it to me once. He's in possession of the only known specimen of this stone. It's quite an amazing specimen, actually, like a stone from a quarry, but having qualities normally observed in a crystal or a mineral. But your father's specimen has been damaged, so it's unusable for his purposes. And what was his purpose, Newt? Why was this stone so important to my father? Well, he never said, and that was part of the secrecy of the whole matter. But he alluded at one time that it was part of some clock design that your father and Joseph Ives were working on. What clock design? That experimental clock they were rebuilding using schematics from an old Gideon Roberts design. Wait, your father didn't tell you these things? No, Newt. None of this is making sense. There must be something you're not telling me. I'm not a liar, Nathan. I'm your friend. If your father didn't tell you these things, there must be a reason for it, for keeping you in the dark. I know, Newt. Forgive me. But there must be something that my father and his group were hiding that isn't immediately obvious. So you were given the mission of locating this particular stone specimen, and your task was connected with some clock project that Ives and my father were involved in. So they must have needed the stone to complete their clock design, no? And we know that both of our missions were kept secret and separated from each other. We must assume the reason for this, for their separation, was that my father and his group knew that someone else was opposed to their efforts, a mysterious competitor, a villain, but they did not know the identity of this person. So they gave me the separate mission to uncover it. A man that we now know to be Eliza Welsh. A man that you, Newton, were serving as a messenger for, isn't that right? I know that you were witnessed at the copper mine in possession of a letter, and the contents of that letter was a coded message that threatened me, Newt, in my textile mill by the pond. Tell me you're not working for Welsh too. What's the truth, Newt? Preposterous, Nathan. Welsh is a competitive man, but he's no villain. And no, I'm not working for him, and I very much resent your accusation. So, Newt, what about the letter you were carrying at the mine? Who wrote it? Who were you delivering it to? I haven't the faintest idea, Nathan. Every time I would go to the mine, the managers would use my visit as an occasion to exchange some mail items, since I was coming from and returning to Forestville. So it was quite common for me to entertain someone's request to carry a letter back to the Forestville post office, from the copper mine, or downtown Bristol, or a friend's house. It's a simple favor. Why would I object? So, Newt, you had no idea the contents of the letters you were carrying? Of course not. I was just a trusted courier of convenience for the Forestville post office. It would be inappropriate for me to open or read any letters entrusted to my care. I see now. We have more questions than answers here, Newt. Listen, my old friend. Godspeed in your honorable service. Let's speak again when you return to Bristol. We must combine our forces to finish your mission, and mine as well. There's much we need to accomplish together. Believe me, Welsh is not the friendly competitor that he pretends to be. He's an instigator and a threat, not only to me, but to all of our town's benefactors. I'll explain everything when we next meet. And so Nathan and Newton part ways. Nathan's mind is swirling with all the disclosures that Newton just revealed. He's eager to confront his father and seek the answers that deserve to be given. Why didn't John Burge tell his son Nathan about this other mission that he gave to Newton Manross? Whatever happened to this secret clock design that he concocted up with Joseph Ives? Why all this secrecy for so many years? Nathan knew that he couldn't immediately confront his father with such provocative questions, so he waited for the right moment to seek his answers. And then, one day, that moment arrived. To be continued in the next chapter of the mission.